am.
Thank you, Dr. Yudis, for introducing us, and thank you, CEE, for hosting this conference. We are very glad. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our session. As we all know, cultivation of creativity is crucial to individuals and nations. And proper evaluation and identification of creativity is the prerequisite of effective cultivation. But evaluation and identification are at risk of being affected by people's stereotypes or biases. Asian Americans, when culturally and linguistically diverse minority group, are often considered as more industrious than creative, which prevents their creativity from being fully recognized and developed. So today we appeal to you to contribute your efforts to disrupt stereotypes faced by Asian Americans. We invite you to examine and innovate through engagement and play, and we desire to move beyond exposure or cosmetic efforts and disrupt creativity stereotypes in education. Our session today will include a situation overview, some collaborative exercises, and many reflections. Specifically, our hope is that after our session, you can become more ready to analyze the current situation of Asian Americans and creativity stereotypes. Second, identify barriers to recognizing creativity in these culturally and linguistically diverse learners. Third, nurture cultural competence about culturally and linguistically diverse students' creativity. And fourth, identify strategies for advocating for Asian American students' creativity. Our session centers on stereotypes, so I want to start with some common stereotypes. Yeah, this is the world according to some Americans in 2012. Some Americans think Australians are all kangaroo riders, and Japan is full of sushi and ninjas. And China is the People's Republic of Chinatown. And America is just a land of awesome.
Of course.
What do you think? Do you agree with those stereotypes?
Nope.
Actually, when we are stereotyping others, we're also being stereotyped by others. Let's take a look at how Americans stereotype each other. So to apply this stereotype conversation back to creativity, what do you think the map will look like if we ask people to identify which parts of the US they think are most creative?
Coasts. I think it's the coasts. East and West Coast.
Thank you.
Someone in the chat said largest population centers as well. Thank you. We really enjoy the participation.
California. Thank you. New Mexico. Yes, yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, everyone has different thoughts, and I'm afraid many of our thoughts are based on stereotypes. So I wanna engage you in an activity that can help us deconstruct stereotypes. First, please tell us where you are from. You can type in the chat box. It can be the state, a city, or region. Sylvania, thank you. Yes, it can be anywhere. The place you were born or the place you are living in. Thank you.
I actually don't have breakout rooms, so do we want to, instead of putting people in breakout rooms, just they pick one of the other locations? Would that, do you think that
Sure,
sounds good?
sure, sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Mary, I didn't finally make you a co-host.
Oh, no, we're good, we're good. And I'm not seeing anything else coming in the chat. Kaya, if you want to introduce
Oh,
the rest of the activity.
Yeah, yes, I forgot. Can I see the message in the chat box if I type?
I think they should. I've got the chat open on my other screen,
Okay, thank you.
so people can pick.
Are we going to be going into breakout rooms?
Yes.
I don't have breakout room access though.
You do, you should now
Oh.
because of making you a co-host.
Okay. My control bar is not showing yet. Kaya, are you able to
What
split
would you
people into
like?
breakout rooms?
What would you like as a breakout room? How many?
If we can get 2 people in each room, please.
Okay, I don't know if I can do it. I don't know how much, let's see, we've got.
Yes.
An alternate solution might be direct messaging each other in chat, since it's a writing exercise.
Oh, it's a great idea. I'm sorry for the hiccup, everyone. I was in, okay, looks like we're good.
Thank you, Dr. Yudes.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, thinking we want to just give them a couple of minutes and then call them back.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, that sounds good. So I've got 1:49 right now. Do you want to call them back at 1:51, and then we can drop the hypothetical activity, I think.
Sure.
Yeah, sounds good.
Sorry, I was on my own in the breakout room.
I was just trying to move people, sorry, I'm
Okay, no worries.
a little slow there. Okay. Some people have not joined their rooms. There's 2 people assigned, but they haven't joined, so that's part of it.
I don't mind hanging out in here. Ladies, I think this is such an interesting concept that you raised. I'm
Thank
about
you.
to do a DEI workshop with a Global Young Academy, which is of an academy of early career scientists. And this is very similar to an exercise that we're planning to do, but we're basing it on the 5 C's of identity. Have you heard of that? The book by Kawame, The Lies That Bind. perhaps you may be familiar with it, but it talks about class, culture, creed, country, and color.
Sounds exciting.
Yeah. But I had a question for you. Maybe perhaps you can answer. In your research, how are you defining Asian?
Kaya, do you want to do this or should I?
If you're going to talk about that later, you don't have to answer it now, but I'm curious.
So we actually cut it for time, but this piece we're sharing today is part of our bigger conversation that we're trying to push about as we think about disaggregating race ethnicity data, as we're thinking about expanding the categories typically used in education research. What are some of the cautions we need to take? For example, we've seen in the last few years how socially some of that disaggregation has been used to further oppression, further harm against specific communities. And so we're trying to support a culture of open research practices that are very intentional, take some tenets from the qualitative tradition about being intentional, about being reflexive and thoughtful, as we try and expand that category to find the nuance that is within.
Yes, I think our definition is based on the US Census, right?
Yeah, and could we call people back, please?
Sure.
I think they've had a couple of minutes.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a great question, though.
Yeah.
It's something that's on our mind.
I didn't put a time on it, so it timed out at 1 minute.
Yeah, sounds good.
Can you come back into the group, please? I was in group one. Alfonso John.
Okay. I think they should be coming back. $18 seconds. I did it quickly and didn't put a time on it. So I wasn't.
Thank you.
It's fine, thank you.
I'm sorry we didn't give you a heads up. I'm used to having my bar. I didn't even think about bringing that up.
We usually need more than we think.
Yes.
I think you
we
have
have almost
everyone.
everyone back. Yeah, Kai,
I
if you want to
think
go
we're
ahead.
back now.
Yes, sure.
Mhm.
I think I have a interesting discussion about how others stereotype you and how you and practice some strategies to deconstruct those stereotypes. Then we want to move on to talk about our subject, Asian Americans. Asian Americans are actually always subject to stereotypes. Some people say Asian Americans are submissive to their teachers and parents, and people say Asian Americans are thriving in education, but that is because they are industrious instead of creative. So as a result, Asian Americans are often stereotyped as a model minority. The model minority argues that Asian Americans are a uniformly high-achieving racial minority that has assimilated well into American society through their hard work, obedience to social mores, and academic achievement. The model minority myth once played a positive role in improving Asian American social status, but the model minority myth could also have detrimental influences on Asian American individuals, families, and communities because it implies that Asian Americans do not require further attention and resources. They're good by themselves.
So to bring this back a little bit to creativity now, we share this quotation that started making the rounds a little bit in the literature that says presumed competent Asian Americans are also perceived to lack warmth, creativity, and vision, and goes on to talk about the perceptions that they might be poor visionaries. And so even though some people might say that certain aspects of a stereotype could be positive, I think maybe all of us have encountered the comment, oh, this child is from an Asian background, he, she, they must be good at math. Our goal today is to really push back on that perception and really dive into how are some of these seemingly positive stereotypes actually harmful. And so when we think about the landscape of Asians in the United States, according to the 2020 US Census, there are nearly 20.6 million individuals, 2.7 million of whom are in US schools. And when we think about the vibrancy in this community, there are over 20 ethnicities that are represented, and each group has its own unique and vibrant beliefs, values, struggles, and mores. And so what we're noticing, and some other scholars have picked up on this as well, is that maybe there's an emphasis on one particular aspect of the creativity definition proposed by Plucker et al. In 2004. And we argue that instead of thinking of this as not creative, thinking about how might different communities value creativity differently, and being clear that it's not necessarily a lack thereof, it might just look a little bit different. And so what we suggest might be happening in that 20.6 million is we understand from the literature that creativity is a skill, it's a pleasure, it's got all sorts of influences and interactions with human life. And in education, when we think about creativity, we understand it's relevant to every student. It's not that creativity is only for a select group, it is for everyone, but the contextual factors, the contextual values, and some of those other characteristics might be influencing how it's suppressed or how it's nurtured, such as the when, where, and the why. And what we find interesting is that when we look at literature and we look at studies that ask Asian students to self-report their ideas about creativity, their values about creativity, contrary to some of those stereotypes that we see, they actually do. This is something that is very important to them. But what might be happening is they're trying to deconstruct these internalized perceptions, these internalized stereotypes and biases, and that may be having an influence in something we need to consider when we are trying to nurture creativity in education, particularly in these populations. And so we suggest that as we consider how can we better support creativity in education, especially for Asian students, we need to be thinking about some of these bigger myths, these bigger biases that might be happening and manifesting, perpetuating some of these things that we are seeing. And so we're going to cut this out, I think, today, because we're running a little bit short on time. But one of the things we like to do when we're talking about this topic is try and get into this idea of perspective taking. A lot of the times that I've noticed when working with my master's creativity students, for example, is they have all these great ideas, they have all these great strategies and suggestions, they're digging into their own creativity as well. But when they're faced with a new situation, there is that little bit of a panic. And so we can share these later, or they'll be in the recording that will go up, I believe, on CEE's page at some point. But take a moment and dig into these. These examples may seem a little bit on the nose, a little too direct, but these are the situations that we encounter when we talk with our community, when we talk with others who are trying to interact and foster this culture of creativity as well. And so in that spirit, thinking about how people might say it takes a whole group, right? And working together, we've tried to put together a few different aspects of trying to build how can we disrupt some of these stereotypes? What are some small actions that we can take that might have a ripple effect? And so the first one, context has gained greater prominence, greater importance in the education research. And so we suggest exploring what those might be, really thinking about what are all those possibilities, what might be those perceptions, what might be influencing them, and then taking time to examine them. Going back to that quotation we shared earlier, instead of asking, is this creative, is this not, asking, why are we recognizing this particular manifestation compared to another? What might be going on there? What do we mean when we're casting around these labels? And then coming back to take a pause. And I would argue this is one of the most critical steps of really sitting in those perceptions, taking that time to be conscious. Beghetto has written extensively about creative mortification and how those micro moments can have lasting impacts, right? So after we take that moment to explore, examine, and pause, thinking about communicating and being adaptable and agile and how we are nurturing creativity. For the specific group of students with whom I work, one of the exercises they've started doing is thinking about when they're communicating with parents or families or really anyone in their environment who might be resistant to supporting creativity in education, how else can we share these values? How can we draw on the different uniqueness we bring to the group and really share these ideas in a way that gets through clearly, that still honors culture, that still honors values, and still kind of gets our main point across? And finally, for our last point, empower, and remembering that we're doing this all together, right? There's a rich scholarship, for example, on school, family, community leadership and partnership, and thinking not just how are we passing on or perpetuating this belief, how are we disrupting the stereotype, but going back to that quotation from that student's self-report, how do we empower this group of students to be confident in their creativity, to have self-esteem, to have that partnership as they move forward? And so thank you so much for joining us today. Again, we'd really like to thank Creativity Expert Exchange for hosting this place for all of us to convene. And we're looking forward to seeing you in the last few minutes of the conference. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much, Mary. And I see you going by Kaya, which is a nice little name. Do we have some quick questions for these presenters? How can we stay in touch with you? Please put your contact information in the chat so that people can grab it. That's very helpful.
Thank you for the feedback.
Yes. I found it really useful because I'm working on inclusive leadership. So I'm trying to see how we overcome a lot of these stereotypes that you were talking about as well, and connecting it to creativity. So they're very important subjects, and I'm really happy to see you doing this.
Thank you.
Hey, yeah. How would you solve that first problem you gave us with the parent who says creativity is a waste of time? What is the right answer to that?
Depends on the parent.
Well, right. But is there how would you handle that?
That's a good question. We actually, I think Kaya might want to answer this too. When I think about, so to set the background, I live in Howard County, Maryland. The population is nearly 20% Asian in background. And this is a conversation we have a lot in our local communication groups. Why are schools talking about creativity? Why are schools talking about innovation? Surely they need to be focusing on our state exams, that kind of a thing. And the response they usually give is, do you want your children to be able to solve problems? Do you want them to be curious and not just accept everything they encounter as factual? And that it does kind of sometimes get into touchy subjects, for example, sort of about state media and other things like that. But often, if you take the word creativity out of it for the first 5 minutes or so of that conversation and focus on associated but different skills like problem solving, like critical thinking, although I have my own hesitations about this kind of framing it in professional and career success, that can often be an easy entry into, oh, but actually, and there's so much more to this. It's like, there's beauty in this too. It's not just something to try and ensure your child gets into the right college program, whatever.
Thank you. I'm going to stop the recording, but you can continue to speak.
Yeah.